Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Dave Walter. I understand we're going to be filmed tonight. I got two short pieces I want to read for you. Some of you might like one of these. If I knew which one was worst, I'd read it first, but I don't know which one is. So I'll just take a shot at it. This one was in the Silver Herald a while back, and I'll read it. It's the shortest one. It's called Faith Leaders with a question mark after it. I didn't know there was such a thing, but I guess there is such a thing. The other day, my curiosity kicked into high gear. What caused the burst was a picture on TV of faith leaders huddling around Donald Trump in prayer. I forgot to note where this took place. Could well have been in the White House. I wondered what they were praying for. I also wondered why they were praying in front of TV cameras instead of in a private space as Christians are taught to do by the Bible. Several possibilities came to mind. Were they praying for Trump to come clean on a long-standing business relationship with Russia? That Trump and his political associates and family members can avoid jail time? Trump can acquire even more wealth by steadily nourishing his relationship with Vladimir Putin? Trump supporters will fail to see through the steady stream of lies from the White House. All media will dissolve into thin air, thus allowing Trump to promulgate all information to America as well as the entire world. That a wall will separate virtuous Americans from all the corrupt Mexican drug dealers, rapists, and criminals. That poor people in America will be more receptive to laws that take their meager incomes and give more of their money to those already wealthy. That they can soon strip over 22 million of their fellow Americans of the health care that is currently being provided by the Affordable Care Act. That Christians will stick with the Republican Party. That Trump will sell his worldly possessions and give the money to the poor. Oh! What business does anyone have questioning the thoughts and actions of this prestigious group of white men anyway? Shouldn't we all merely put our faith in the Commander-in-Chief who has steadily told us that he alone understands what Americans' problems are, and he alone knows how to fix them? Please tell me that the faith leaders weren't praying to Trump. P.S. Can anyone give us assurance that they weren't praying for a more racially homogeneous America? That's bad. Oh, well, I got another one too.
It makes sense.
The second one is about a current controversial issue that a lot of people aren't even aware of, and it's in here. Hopefully you already know about it. Most of you should be well informed. If you're not, you should be. This is called Look Before You Leap. Now that the Republican Party has temporary political control over America, a strong push is being made to promote Christianity. Christians, beware! Did I mention that Christians need to beware of this effort? When you boil it all down, Christianity is only a belief. It is not a science. It is not based on provable facts, as some political leaders seem to be claiming these days. Some are pushing for teaching the Bible in schools. They will not be able to present that as a book of facts. I personally believe there are many truths and sound tenets within the Bible. However, that does not render the whole book a collection of facts. Neither is evolution as factual as once perceived and accepted according to many modern scientists. Here is powerful evidence that Christianity has been and will remain a belief. The first 5 words of the King James Version of the Bible are, In the beginning, God created. This will shake some of y'all, I believe. Thinking people must ask this question. Specifically, when was the beginning? You don't have too much to work with when you say merely that something happened in the beginning, if you don't know when the beginning was. Humans seek clarity on the onset of all events, such as births, historical happenings, etc. Why do Americans celebrate the 4th of July? Why not just celebrate sometime around that date? Does anyone actually know when Jesus was born? Does anyone know when he was crucified and died? Scientists use standard methods in an attempt to establish dates for inanimate objects as well as for life forms on Earth. This usually results in a good educated guess. It gives us something to go by. We want to nail things down as well as we can. What compels humans to seek such precision? The truth? Maybe that's just the way we work. We want to understand things in terms of their relative time. Tree rings show foresters the growth rates and climatic conditions affecting trees. Even they are unable to interpret that evidence as facts. It is merely a systematic and useful guide. Tom, can you argue with that?
No, I can't.
All right.
That's speaking the truth so far. Yeah.
Now, to the words that are very difficult to say and consider. Where did God come from? When and how did he assume control of the heavens and the earth that the Bible says he created? Native Americans befuddled our European ancestors with those questions. Native Americans had their own beliefs in oral history. Rather than listen to them about their beliefs and historical accounts, they were subdued militarily and subsequently endured the Christianizing process, wiping out much valuable insight into how they developed their beliefs. Country Music Hall of Fame singer Merle Haggard sang, "No, you never like the clothes I wear on Sunday, just because I don't believe the way you do. But I believe the Lord knows I'm unhappy, because I can't be myself when I'm with you." If Haggard was accurate, that he was rejected because he didn't believe like someone, what does that say about Christian acceptance and rejection of others? Today there is a religious struggle being played out between Christianity and Islam. Or is there? Is this not really a struggle for worldly power that is playing Islam against Christianity in yet another holy war? In summation, if, one, we can't say when the beginning was, even when some people are claiming that we're near the end of time, and two, we don't know how God came to be, how can anyone propose a creation science? We're left with a belief. We have to choose as individuals to believe or not to believe. Government bodies should not be trying to coerce anyone to accept the Bible as a book of facts. Christians need to look before they leap into the idea of a theocracy for America. The marriage of Christianity and government will corrupt both like mixing coffee with cream. Neither component, coffee nor cream, could ever be restored to its original state of being. If Christians want to practice Christian tenets, they would be wise to not allow worldly governments to creep into their environs in search of political strength.
I hate it when I miss your readings.
For certain fee, I'll read it again for you somewhere.
Well, I might be willing to pay, Dave.
Oh, you gotta tell us who's next.
Maybe a cup of coffee or something like that.
Okay, I can do that. I can handle that.
So who's next? That's you.
You're in charge, Dave. Who's next?
Oh,
Yeah.
I have to look at the paper then, don't I? All right, theoretically, a young man by the name of Thomas Baker,
Ooh.
who originated somewhere around Webster, North Carolina.
Right, but I was supposed to be third. Evidently,
Yeah,
nobody signed up
Well,
for
that
second.
second person is now red.
Well, we still want to.
Go get him, Tom.
Oh,
Yeah.
Shed a little light.
Yeah, that's all.
Shed a little light.
All right. As most of you know, I've been here a few times and started out reading a little bit from a novel, but I've been trying to put together some writing called Bits and Pieces, and it's true stories from my early life, and one of them is called The Memoirs of a Young Warrior Wannabe. It's hopefully one of these days it will move into my experience in Vietnam, but I'm not there yet. I'm using this a little bit as a healing process, the writing, and it's been good, helpful, but you know, I'm just not there yet to write so much about the experiences. Now, having said all of that, this Memoirs of a Young Warrior Bee, the kind of like the introduction. In order to be a true warrior, you must start young, real young. You also need to have a vivid imagination, plus a sense of humor, or Mr. Murphy will kick your ass. He will kick your ass anyway, but if you have that great imagination, you can tell huge lies to cover your failures, and the sense of humor will allow you to laugh about it. Now, I'm fixing to tell you about a little episode that me and Marvin Allison and his brother Donald, who wound up being a door gunner in Nam like myself years later, but me and Marvin was in the 8th grade, and I think Donald was in the 7th, and we were camped out up on Kings Mountain in above Webster there, coon hunting. Or we had 2 old dogs that hung around the fire, and we thought we was coon hunting. But so I'll start, and it's a lead up, so bear with me. I'm not sure why I struggled so badly through the first 6 grades of school, but reading was very difficult for me. And the further you get behind, the worse it gets. To simply be called upon to read aloud in class for me was like going before a firing squad. But a warrior has to know how to read. So I doubled down and I pressed forward. Luckily, Mrs. Cowan, who in this previous piece had whooped my hind end vigorously, had been a very hard disciplinarian, but she was patient with me on my reading, and slowly, ever so slowly, I got better. My great imagination may have helped, because when Mrs. Cowan introduced me to characters like Paul Bunyan and Pickles Bill, it was over. I was hooked. Shortly after that came the Black Stallion. I don't know how many of you remember the Black Stallion series, but I read those profusely. Then war stories and history. My father's tales of his wartime experiences fueling my thirst. By the end of the 8th grade, I'd read Winston Churchill's 3 volumes of history in World War II, plus Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. Once I cleared the obstacle of reading, my next objective for warriordom was hunting. Every warrior needs the knowledge of the woods both day and night. There's not a single squirrel or rabbit within a mile of my house when I was growing up that didn't live in fear of my double-barrel shotgun. But being a warrior is much more than just hunting. He must be daring, or maybe dumb, as you'll see. There's a close facsimile there. My friend Marvin Allison and his brother Donald had 2 old Walker coon dogs that we occasionally tried to hunt with. One Saturday night we were camping on Kings Mountain, hoping that the 2 dogs would leave the warmth of the fire and tree a coon or something. But as we watched them scratch their fleas, we knew we needed a different plan or we would go hungry. Our survival gear consisted of an old frying pan, a half a loaf of sliced bread, 1 can of Beanie Weenies, 2 short cans of Coke, and Marvin's single shot 22. Not much for warrior wannabes. We needed meat for that frying pan. After discussing several options, we settled on an adventure, again more dumb than great. Old man Clyde Fisher, who lived on the bank of the road just across from the Methodist cemetery on Buchanan Loop, had several chickens that roosted in a poplar tree just across the road from his house. Fat chickens, food. We would simply borrow one. Our camp was only a short walk from Clyde's house, and we started down the mountain covering that distance in total silence. We stopped at the edge of a field that separated the cemetery from Roy Buchanan's property, crawled across the 4-strand barbed wire fence, and sneaked down through the pasture, missing a short piece of fence that had only 2 strands of wire, and eased up to the chicken-laden poplar tree. It had been voted 2-1 that I would be the climber and the fetcher of the chicken, while my buddies were to stand watch for Clyde or his wife Annabelle. So, without further ado, and silent as a ghost, I began climbing up the tree. There were no lights on in Clyde's house, so I thought all was safe. As I neared my victim, the tree suddenly came alive with the sound of squawking chickens. Now let me regress here and explain something. Some of you may know who Mr. Murphy is, but for you that don't, he is a hard ass and he sits on the right-hand side of God of war and doom. He also thinks he is my friend and accompanies me often. It is here in the darkened night that Mr. Murphy makes his debut. My intended victim was only a foot from my hand when it realized what was happening and quickly decided it didn't want to join me. It was a mean old SOB and it started fighting. I had just managed to grab its legs and was jerking hard to dislodge it from its nightly perch when the lights in Clyde's house flickered on. Now, as you will see, one of my great warrior mistakes during this mission was not having an escape plan thought out. So, without thinking, down the tree slid me and the rooster, who was by that time gnawing heavily on my hand with his beak. My feet had barely touched the ground when Clyde's shotgun suddenly exploded from his porch and leaves began to shower me and the rooster as iron pellets zinged through the night air. To this day, I do not think Clyde was trying to hit me, but if his thought was to scare me, he succeeded. Moving forward, I have to tell you that my family raised chickens, and I had seen many tough roosters in my day, but the one I had in my fist was tough as they come. A large Rhode Island Red, he attacked my hand with vengeance. Now, as I have told you before, it is not easy being a warrior, even a young one, and although my hand hurt from the savage pecking, I knew I was in a tight spot. But I had friends, right? Well, I thought I did until I began calling softly for Marvin and Donald. Only silence greeted my calls and the sound of another shell being shoved into Clyde's shotgun. My legs were moving before my thoughts reached any good solution, and I was racing across the pasture when suddenly I hit the short piece of barbed wire fence that I had forgotten about, mid-thigh, and I went down. Somehow that chicken stayed in my grasp as I painfully untangled myself from the barbed wire. Again I called to my trusty friends, and this time they answered. "We ain't coming down there. Old man Clyde's still on the porch," whined Marvin. "I'm hurt, damn it," I moaned, but understood my situation. Slowly I crawled out. I've still got scars where I hit that barbed wire fence. Slowly I crawled out from the tangled wire and limped up to where my two friends were peeking out from behind an old shed that belonged to Roy Buchanan. "You okay?" they asked while their eyes stared at the ground. I never answered. Instead, I simply limped past them and headed towards our camp. The rooster hung limp in my hand, evidently having accepted his fate, for he had not made a sound. Back at camp, we realized we had nothing to carry water in, so after angrily wringing its neck, I painfully, my hand had been pecked to death, dry plucked that chicken, gutted him, and stuck him on a sharpened stick over a roaring fire. Our warrior skills lacking, we managed, after an hour, to blacken the rooster on the outside and not cook the inside to the point our old coon dogs just sniffed at him and walked slowly down the trail leading back to home. Sadly, we realized defeat and began our retreat like worn-out fighters. We put out the fire, threw the burnt chicken into the bushes, packed our meager tools and supplies, and headed home. Marvin and Donald's house was much closer than mine, and my journey was longer because of my cut leg, which to this day still shows the scars. As I walked along Buchanan Loop, I could see the lights had gone out of Clyde and Annabelle's house, and the remainder of the chickens were fast asleep. High five. We'll see the scar.
You got any idea who's next?
That was me.
Take it away.
Alright. Never actually done this thing because the guy over there is my uncle, and I rarely get to see him. Last time I saw him was about 4 years ago, and that was prior to starting Western. And
Welcome, sir.
he's the family member that you really want to see, but he always has important jobs that always have him several states apart. So it's not so much like saying, "Oh, my so-and-so lives, just 3 towns over, and we can make a day trip of it." It said for him, you have to plan several days of travel. It said, and then it said how long you think the animals at the house can. But I'm going to do another one of my alphabet stew pieces, and for those of you who don't know, I just go through the alphabet. And it said trying to relate to a story, and this is about something I've created in my spare time. I'm trying to get it finely tuned. Because I think it's the one thing that could lead to a lot of things, and when you understand the source of it, you're going to start thinking of other franchises, that how it could be woven into. A long time ago, there was magic everywhere. Before rapidly took over, peace reigned. Careful study of magic occupied time, distracting many from the horrifying truth. Everyone was still different and wanting more. For many, basic spells were enough to live. Said getting by without the need to battle others. Heroes were only things of play in stories. Imagination fueled ideas for greater magic, justifying the descent into darkness for others. Kept secrets were brought to the surface. It said learning only led to those seeking power. More became curious about what lied beneath, not knowing that power gluttony was deadly. Only a few avoided hunger and stayed in the light, protecting others from the dark magic users, quelling the evil wherever it rose up with odd gifts. Rare powers were born to increase hope in the down. Strange skills of controlling plants or bugs were normal. So to fight evil, sometimes a touch of silliness worked. Understanding evil wasn't enough to stop its spread. Victory still required a lot of effort to be assured. With both sides showing their talent, extreme losses occurred instead of not fighting. Yet, darkness returned to shadows. However, zealots remained to find new recruits. After centuries of hiding, magic returned loudly. Blood of the innocent was spilled, creating fear. Chaos erupted as a champion rose to fight. Dressed in red, a boy soon became a man, eager to see evil's efforts thwarted. Finding trouble was easy with a compass. Going after other magical forces was tough. Higher-ranking evil lurked in the shadows, investigating the powers of the budding hero, judging him to see if he was was worthy while keeping the servants in the public eye, masking an even darker plot in magic. Never giving up, the hero continues on to new places, never to rest fully. Protecting the innocent is a great task, quickly leading to fame and ruin. Required magic study time is very rare. Safely discovering new powers is hard. Tackling enemies only adds to the risk. Until evil falls, the hero lives in fear, vexed by a lack of proper magical training. Without help, said the hero must learn fast. Exceeding expectations is hard. Said, yet the quest goes on and on, zoned away to save the day alone. I'm just working on a magical superhero, and the short version is that there's really only one person that could ever actually help him, and there's going to be at one point where he's going to kind of fade from obscurity, but he's going to be new people. But for right now, for the first book, it's just let's see what happens when you hit the ground running.
That's all I've got, but don't start leaving. There's another little thing I would like to do tonight. We've only been here 25 minutes. I want you to think for a minute. Wanda, did you sign up? No. Are you going to read, though? No. Well, let's do this. Think of some quotation. Anybody can do this tonight now. Some quotation that's stuck in your mind. Your teacher made you do it in the 2nd grade or the 4th grade. And it's just stuck in there. Are most of you in this room kind of like that? Sometimes something just sticks in your head?
Hey, Brute.
Yeah, that's what I was going to use. You don't even have to get up to do this.
Life's rough, wear a helmet.
Say what?
Life's rough, wear a helmet.
Hank and me. Somebody said 31 words the other day. There's something about 31 words I read in the book. I read so much I can't keep track of it. Marcia?
Honey, I can't remember anything. I mean, I can, but there's a bunch of quotes in my head. But
I'm going to send you back.
I know.
First grade.
I go back to homework.
Memorizing
Study
101. Come on.
I'll get back to you.
Okay. You got one?
Not one I can say.
Yeah, you can.
Maybe we should have said that to begin with.
Yeah. No censorship here. Is that it?
You got one?
If we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called science.
True.
In my office one day, I said, the more it rains, the more it pours.
Yeah.
Aubrey? You're in on this
I
too?
remember a Mark Twain quote. It was,
Let us have it.
it's better to remain silent and have people think that you're stupid than to speak and remove all doubt.
That's it. Yes.
That's a good, I did it that way.
I thought that was Confucius.
Tom?
War's hell and combat's a mother.
Amen.
Yeah.
No teacher taught you that.
Where?
You know, there's a big old staff sergeant.
Mine's from I only know like song quotes, like most songs.
Yeah.
And even though it aren't wrong, I'll stand before the Lord and song with nothing on my tongue but hallelujah.
That's true.
I can only do an approximation, and no teacher taught me this, but I did pick up on it in school when I got older. It's by Margaret Mead, and it's, dang it, never doubt that 2 or more people gathered together can change the world. In fact, it's the only way it's ever happened.
Yep.
That's right.
That's why I think this group here is so important.
Yeah.
Sometimes we think there's not a huge crowd and there's not much going on, but
Yeah.
I believe that small groups of people actually wind up getting things done.
Yeah. This is one of those things where quality is better than quantity.
Yeah.
Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent.
Oh,
I love that one.
Uh, this is one that I'm hoping somebody in here knows who said it. It's a very powerful statement. It says, tolerance of the intolerable may be wiser than meeting rage with rage. And I read that a long time ago, and it was just like you threw a dart. It went in my head and it stuck. But I forgot to find out who said it. And I regret that.
Well, you can always just write it down and just do a Google search for it.
I've done a Google, and it said, son, you might have made that up yourself.
Take credit for it.
No, it's somebody who was, it's a Vietnam veteran. I do know that. I've often thought it was, not William Shire, but somebody who writes that kind of stuff. And I have actually Googled it, so this is not a long quotation. If you can go home and find it, I'd really like it. I think I've even said it in here before. Tolerance of the intolerable may be wiser than meeting rage with rage.
Well, on that note, David, let me tell you a little, it's off of the quote thing, a little ideal that Marshall and I are kicking around. These politicians are having all these town halls, and they don't amount to a whole lot because politicians are politicians. It's one of those things to where I think if we could get some just ordinary people together who may think differently on certain issues and sit down and talk through them and listen to each other and see what they've got to say. And start at the local level, which is, if there is any way of saving this country, that's what it's going to take. So we're pushing to do that. I hope before the next election we can do that. And I'd love to do it. You think it could even be possible?
It has to be possible. We've gone through hard times before, and we'll have to do it again. It's a hard time. I began to realize that the turn right before the last century started, well, actually when 9/11 came along, that we were going to have great philosophical and spiritual discussions in this century, because we have to start figuring out what it is that you believe in that I can latch on to and we can get along with it, rather than just find fault with everything, with a Christian and a Muslim and a Jew and everybody fighting each other and polarizing. And Democrats and Republicans doing the same thing. We have to find ways to get along. It's our job.
I never talked to you together with people
Yeah.
and with people.
Yeah. So, go back around. Anybody got another one?
I recently read a quote, I'm paraphrasing it, but from Richard Rohr, and it basically said that the closer you get to thinking that you really know who God is, the more you know you don't.
Say it again.
The closer you get to really thinking that you know who God is, the more you realize that you don't.
Matt?
This is actually from a game franchise, but it literally said, the closer you get to light, the bigger your shadow grows. And I think that meant that even if you're close to discovering something great, there's still so much more evil can stretch back to still get you.
Marsha?
I gotta pass.
Get off that.
I'm on the list.
I'm looking up your.
Oh, you're looking it up. You stay on that phone. Claire?
There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
Oh, that's good.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
One.
You don't do it right.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right.
Oh, here's one. What's the one about Noah's Ark? Amateurs built the Ark, professionals built the Titanic.
That's a moral story there.
It's a moral story.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, alcohol was involved in both.
Oh.
Maybe so.
There were
I
several.
have a cross stitch that says, well, it just went out of my head. What does it say? I have several. Just something to the fact of just when you thought you knew the answers, they changed all the questions.
Yeah.
I think Jimmy Buffett said that in a song that James Taylor wrote. He said, all the answers and all the questions are locked in the attic one day.
Oh, dude, now you up my alley.
He went
What did
there.
you say?
Just when you
Auburn?
think you know the answers, they changed all the questions.
No charge for this now, you.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of Yogi Berra, but you know, I can't.
Yeah.
Oh, God, wow.
Google that.
Veterans Center.
Okay.
And I can't, I mean,
I've got one more that's popped into my head, and if nobody else has any, I'll let you know this one. I believe it was Lyndon Johnson who said, "As long as there are men who hate and destroy, we must have the courage to resist, or we shall see all of our dreams of freedom swept away on the flood of conquest. This shall not happen." It's pretty powerful stuff.
There were a couple of really amazing quotes in that Ken Burns series. You know, they interviewed Caputo and
Tim O'Brien.
Tim O'Brien, and they're just floating around in the back of my head right now. But in that book that Tim O'Brien wrote, The Things They Carry, was pretty awesome. And it's not coming to me, so maybe it will. Maybe I need another beer or something.
Oh, this was from a peace activist prior to the civil rights era of the 1960s, but there is no way to peace. Peace is the way.
Oh, man.
Now that was one I think came across was,
Hey, did you find that quotation?
I'm still.
While she's doing it, here's another one. If you can't say something nice, come sit right here by me.
you taught me
Who
that
said
one
that?
way.
I don't know who said it.
Or if you're talking about Congress. I got one. Everyone's life is a song. Unfortunately, not everyone's a quick composer, so we're just stuck staring at a blank music sheet.
Did you just make
I
that
read
up?
that concept
Yes.
the other day.
Sounds good, yeah.
But everybody has a song. Everybody is a song. I read that. Anybody else got another one?
Wait a minute. Tell me the quote again. Intolerance is itself a form of violence and an obstacle to the growth of a true.
No, it was tolerant of tolerance is better than
True democratic spirit.
rage and rage.
Oh, that's actually a good quote. That's Mahatma Gandhi.
What?
Intolerance is itself a form of violence and an obstacle to the growth of a true democratic spirit. Mahatma Gandhi.
Yes.
Sorry, I thought I read it.
I'm gonna wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning with some great thought.
That's why you always gotta sleep with a pad and piece of paper on it. Because I've woken up from weird dreams, written them down, and just started brainstorming.
Yeah.
That's how Stephen King writes his books.
Yeah.
I've got an interesting one, then we'll go with this. As I've told you all, I think several times, my dad was a physiological alcoholic. And the Chinese say this, it's a powerful statement. First the man takes a drink, then the drink takes a drink, then the drink takes a man. And I've seen that thing happen 3 times in my life, once with my dad and twice again with other people I've known. First the man takes a drink, then the drink takes a drink, then the drink takes a man. It's a fascinating way of looking at it. Thank y'all.
Thank you,
Thank
Dave.
you.